Good Wednesday morning, friends, or afternoon, or evening, or whenever you might happen to join together and catch this time of pause. This is indeed our midweek time to pause together, to take a deep breath in the middle of all that swirls in our world and to ask a question that we've been asking together since March of 2020, is where we're seeing God at work in ourselves and in the world. For those that I don't know, I'm Reverend Jennifer Finley, the Momentum and Discipleship Pastor here at First United Methodist Church in Kirksville. And whether or not you are geographically here in Kirksville, wherever you are, I am so glad to be joining you today. I have come to treasure these moments to pause together. They have become important parts of my own spiritual practice. In the last few weeks, we have been asking together a version of our question, where are we sensing God at work? We've been asking, what is it that shifts our perspective enough that we can know and feel and sense God's movement in ourselves and in our world? What are the practices, big and small, that shift our perspective just a little bit? We've talked about, and many of you have shared, how baking sometimes does that, or going for a walk, or seeing a sunset or a sunrise. Some of you have talked about how doing dishes or cleaning the house sometimes shifts your perspective. Some of you have shared about reading books in ways that shift perspective. I have shared that sometimes sitting on the floor and looking up in a new way shifts my perspective just a little bit. Today I'm in our chapel at church, despite the fact that it's not the best lighting, because indeed it is one of those places and those practices that shape and shift my perspective. This beautiful stained glass window behind me is one that I know I love, and I know many of you have loved, continue to love as well. It has Jesus and the words, "Come to me, all who are weary." And so, friends, whether you are joyful and excited today, or whether you are weary or someplace in between, know that Jesus gathers us into this moment across time and space and all that might divide us, into this moment to wonder together, what is it that's shifting our perspective today and in these days, and where are we seeing God at work? Today, I thought I would share with you one of my favorite poems. It is a familiar one to me. I don't remember whether I've shared it with you before. It's one that routinely shifts my perspective, and God meets me in it. It's by a poet named Wendell Berry. When he is still living, he lives in Kentucky. He is a farmer as well as a poet, an essayist, and author. He's written many books and essays and talks a lot about farming and agrarian culture, but it's his poems that have stuck with me. And there's one in particular that I come back to pretty much once or twice a year, usually near the end of our academic semesters, as our college students are leaving for a semester and rhythms are changing. But I picked it back up this week, and I thought I would share it with you. The bell calls in the town where forebears cleared the shaded land and brought high daylight down to shine on field and trodden road. I hear, but understand contrarily, and walk into the woods. I leave labor and load, take up a different story. I keep an inventory of wonders and uncommercial goods. I climb up through the field that my long labor has kept clear. Projects, plans unfulfilled waylay and snatch at me like briars. For there is no rest here where ceaseless effort seems to be required, yet fails and spirit tires with flesh, because failure and weariness are sure in all that mortal wishing has inspired. I go in pilgrimage across an old fenced boundary to wildness without age, where in their long dominion the trees have been left free. They call this soil here Eden, slants and steeps hard to stand straight upon, even without a burden. No more a perfect garden, there's an immortal memory that it keeps, I leave work's daily rule and come here to this restful place where music stirs the pool and from high stations of the air fall notes of wordless grace. Strewn remnants of the primal Sabbath's hymn, and I remember here a tale of evil twined with good, serpent and vine, and innocence as evil's stratagem. I let that go a while, for it is hopeless to correct by generations' toil, and I let go my hopes and plans that no toil can perfect. There is no vision here but what is seen, white bloom, and nothing explains but a mute blessedness exceeding all distress. The fresh light stained 100 shades of green. Uproar of wheel and fire that has contained us like a cell opens and let us hear a stillness no longer than all time, where leaf and song fulfill the passing light, pass with the light, return. Renewed as in rhyme, there is no human vision subject to our revision. God's eye holds every leaf as light is worn. Ruin is in place here, the dead leaves rotting on the ground, the live leaves in the air are gathered in a single dance that turns them round and round. The fox cub trots his almost pathless path, as silence as his absence. These passings resurrect a joy without defect, the life that steps and sings in ways of death. I love this poem. I thought I would share it with you because it speaks of shifting perspective. It speaks of Sabbath and rest, things that we are all called to as Christians, and perhaps we don't do very well. At least I know I find that challenging. But this poem speaks of ways to enter into natural rhythms of rest in nature. And so I hope that as you heard that, perhaps words or phrases stood out to you. I'm sharing it in part because there are multiple ways to shift our perspectives in our daily tasks, ways in which we do things where God meets us. And then there are also times when stepping away from all of that is also good and holy and allows a perspective shift. And so I'm doing that this week. Those of you who are astute may notice this is pre-recorded rather than live. That is because I am hanging out at a monastery in Kansas, enjoying some time to do exactly what this poem speaks about, of leaving a few tasks behind and settling into the rhythms of God's love and God's grace. It's a rhythm that we should all embrace in some way, shape, or form. And so I know that God is meeting me in that practice this week. I know that God meets me in the daily rhythms of life as well, and meets us in those daily rhythms as well. And so I'm simply going to read a few lines of this poem again. And I hope that as you hear them, God meets you. God meets you in these moments, acknowledging that Sabbath rest in whatever forms they come for us, whether they are in the ordinary moments of a day or the big moves into a different rhythm for a few days, are good and holy and necessary. The bell calls in the town where forebears cleared the shaded land and brought high daylight down to shine on field and trodden road. But I hear and understand contrarily and walk into the woods. I take up a different story. I keep inventory of wonders and uncommercial goods. I go in pilgrimage across an old fence boundary to wildness without age, where in their long dominion the trees have been left free. They call the soil here Eden, slants and steeps. Eden, friends. Eden is when God meets us, whether it is in the daily tasks of life or in the times that we take and structure to step away from those daily tasks for a few minutes. So my hope and my prayer is that wherever this week finds you, God is meeting you. And I look forward to being back with you live next Wednesday. Go in peace, my friends. Amen.